It started with laughter. That kind of laughter that fills a room. Loud, effortless, and contagious. But what no one expected was that by the time it stopped, two of the most talked about people in the world, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, would be at the center of Hollywood's most humiliating public moment in years. Imagine it. The Beverly Hills Hotel, glowing like a palace under warm California light. A red carpet lined with black SUVs and cameras flashing like lightning. Kris Jenner's 70th birthday, the kind of party where being invited was a privilege and being ignored was career suicide. Everyone who was anyone was there. A-list actors, billionaires, moguls, and icons. It was supposed to be a night of champagne, nostalgia, and elegance. But instead, it became the night when Hollywood, through laughter and irony, turned its back on the royal couple that once thought they had conquered it. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And at the center of it all, one man with a microphone and perfect comedic timing, Chris Rock. You might ask yourself, what could possibly push someone like Chris Rock, known for his sharp but fair humor, to take aim at the Duke and Duchess of Sussex on a night meant for celebration? Why would a private roast turn into a worldwide headline? And how did a single word, grifters, manage to echo through Hollywood like a thunderclap, ending Meghan's dream of being the Queen of California? To answer that, we have to start with the irony of it all. Because this wasn't just any event. This was Kris Jenner's night. A woman who built an empire out of media manipulation and self-branding. Meghan Markle had long admired that kind of power. She once envied it, even studied it. But the Hollywood crowd has a cruel memory. They never forget who earns their fame and who tries to buy it. From the moment Meghan and Harry walked in, something felt off. Their entrance was carefully rehearsed. The smiles were deliberate, the hand-holding perfectly timed, the kind of public display meant to tell the world, we belong here. But the energy in the room told another story. The laughter was polite, the applause thin. Meghan was hoping for admiration. What she got was observation. Now, let's pause for a second. You ever walked into a room where everyone is smiling at you, but you can feel they're laughing behind those smiles? That's what this was. A room full of industry powerhouses who'd once sympathized with the royal rebels, now watching the spectacle they had become. And this is where the tension began. Because Meghan wasn't the only one who noticed. Kris Jenner, always reading her guests like a chessboard, clocked the unease immediately. She'd seen this kind of tension before. When power shifts, alliances break. The Kardashians had ruled American fame for 2 decades, and Kris knew when someone's popularity was slipping. Meghan's star, once blinding, was beginning to flicker. What made it worse? Meghan still thought she could control the narrative. The Sussexes had become experts at crafting emotional stories, heartbreak, betrayal, resilience, all packaged for prime time. But in Hollywood, stories have an expiration date. Once the sympathy runs out, the truth rushes in. And that night, the truth came wearing a tuxedo, holding a mic, and smiling like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. Chris Rock had performed for presidents, roasted legends, and survived scandals that would destroy lesser men. But this was different. He wasn't just here to make jokes. He was here to remind everyone what authenticity sounded like in a world drowning in pretension. Before he even opened his mouth, the audience leaned forward. Cameras were discreetly lowered, drinks paused midair. Everyone sensed it. Something was about to happen. He started with light jabs, Hollywood plasticity, influencer culture, the Kardashians' endless empire of fame. Laughter erupted. Even Kris, sipping her martini, was in tears. But then, like a predator circling its prey, Kris shifted his tone. His smile didn't fade, it sharpened. You know, he said, pacing the stage slowly. Hollywood's full of folks pretending to be humble while counting their Netflix checks. The room chuckled. But not Meghan. Not Harry. Kris continued, but at least some people earned it. Others just married into it, and never stopped cashing in. There it was, a collective gasp, the kind that ripples across a crowd when everyone realizes the punchline isn't a joke. The laughter froze. Meghan's smile faltered. Harry looked at his drink. Kris didn't name names, not yet. But everyone knew exactly who he meant. This was the moment. The shift. The exact second when the night turned from celebration to spectacle. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or look away. And somewhere, in the corner of that glittering ballroom, Kris Jenner's lips curled into a knowing smirk. But to understand why that one line carried such weight, we need to rewind. Because this wasn't just about a party. This was the culmination of months, years, of Hollywood's growing frustration with Meghan and Harry's endless cycle of interviews, documentaries, and grievances. People had begun whispering, quietly at first, that the Sussexes weren't the victims they portrayed. They were entrepreneurs of their own pain, monetizing royal drama into million-dollar deals. Netflix, Spotify, memoirs. Every heartbreak had a contract attached. And while the world once applauded their courage, fatigue had set in. That's where Chris Rock came in. To do what comedians do best, say what everyone's thinking, but no one dares to say out loud. The genius of that moment wasn't just the humor, it was the precision. Chris turned Hollywood's polite hypocrisy into a mirror. He reflected everyone's growing discomfort with the royal couple who'd turned rebellion into brand strategy. And it hit Meghan harder than she expected. Because for the first time, she wasn't the one controlling the story. She wasn't the one holding the mic. Harry, meanwhile, sat frozen. This was supposed to be a comeback moment, a sign they were still part of the elite social circle. But it was slipping through his fingers. Every smirk, every whisper felt like betrayal. He realized too late that they weren't laughing with them. They were laughing at them. What must that feel like? To go from adored to avoided, from admired to mocked? To walk into a room you once dreamed of belonging to, and realize you've become its entertainment? Now, let's talk about the deeper irony here. Because Meghan's path to this moment started long before this party. Long before Harry. Long before the palace. Her Hollywood dream had always been about acceptance, about finally being seen by the elite who once overlooked her. When she left royal life, she thought she was returning to familiar territory. But Hollywood had changed. Fame wasn't enough anymore. Authenticity was the new currency. And Meghan, for all her charm, had spent too long playing a character. That's the cruelest part. The city she once thought would save her became the one to expose her. And Kris Jenner's party wasn't just another social gathering. It was symbolic. It was the house of mirrors, where every reflection revealed the truth behind the brand. The Kardashians, for all their theatrics, had something Meghan didn't: self-awareness. They owned their image. They never pretended to be something they weren't. Meghan did, and that's why Hollywood turned on her. Meanwhile, Chris Rock continued, weaving humor and truth like a blade wrapped in silk. He cracked jokes about people selling pain like merch, about royal rebels who forgot rebellion meant work. The audience laughed, cautiously, then loudly. Every laugh felt like a vote. Every pause, a silent agreement. By the time Chris delivered his final blow, calling out grifters who forgot gratitude, the crowd roared. Some laughed from shock, others from relief. It was like watching a tension finally snap. And Meghan? Her eyes told the whole story. Frozen smile, trembling hands. The mask had cracked. But here's the twist. The cameras at the event cut just seconds later. The live feed that had been capturing snippets for social media went dark. Someone, somewhere, decided the rest shouldn't be seen. But by then, it didn't matter. Enough people had witnessed it. Enough phones had recorded snippets. Within hours, whispers spread. By morning, the internet had exploded. The phrase Chris Rock calls Meghan and Harry grifters was trending in over a dozen countries. TikTok clips, fan reactions, memes, the digital wildfire couldn't be contained. And the irony? The couple who built their empire on media exposure were now powerless to stop it. Think about it. One unscripted joke, one spontaneous moment of truth, undid years of calculated branding. That's the power of comedy and the danger of image. But this is only where the story begins. Because what came next wasn't just a PR crisis. It was a reckoning. Hollywood's elite, once careful not to offend Meghan, started to whisper openly. Invitations disappeared. Collaborations fell through. The couple who once lectured the world about authenticity were now being quietly frozen out by the very people they tried to impress. Still, for that one glittering night, surrounded by diamonds, champagne, and laughter, the truth slipped through the cracks of perfection. And Chris Rock, knowingly or not, became the voice of a sentiment many had buried, that maybe, just maybe, the fairy tale had been a performance all along. So ask yourself, was it cruelty? Or was it justice? Did Chris Rock cross the line? Or simply say what everyone else was too afraid to admit? Because as Meghan sat there under the ballroom chandeliers, her empire built on sympathy and spectacle began to crumble, not with scandal or betrayal, but with laughter. And as the applause died down, one sound lingered, the faint clink of Harry's untouched champagne glass. They had walked into the room believing they were still the stars of their story, but by the time they left, they were the punchline. What no one realized then was that the night wasn't over, because someone else, someone very close to Kris Jenner, had caught every second on camera, and by morning, those recordings would change everything. The invitations were as exclusive as the guest list itself, gold foil envelopes sealed with a crimson K. There were no public announcements, no press leaks, no Instagram hints, just a whisper through the Hollywood grapevine. Kris Jenner's 70th birthday was happening, and if you weren't invited, you weren't relevant anymore. The names alone could fill an entire red carpet. Beyoncé and Jay-Z, Oprah Winfrey, Denzel Washington, George Clooney, Kim Kardashian, and half of Hollywood's most powerful executives. It was the kind of gathering where billionaires asked for selfies, where every smile hit a calculation, and where reputations could be revived or ruined with a single conversation. And there, nestled among those names, was a surprising addition, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. At first, many thought the listing was a joke. Meghan? At Kris Jenner's private milestone bash? The woman who built her empire on self-exposure, meeting the woman who tried to reinvent royalty through media storytelling? It sounded too poetic to be true, but it was very real. And that, perhaps, was Kris's point. Because Kris Jenner, the queen of controlled chaos, knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't just invite people, she curated narratives. Every seat, every pairing, every angle was deliberate. And this time, she wanted sparks. The Beverly Hills Hotel ballroom had been transformed into a universe of excess. Velvet drapes, golden chandeliers, champagne towers reflecting soft candlelight. The theme, 70 and savage, wasn't subtle. It was a declaration. Kris Jenner wasn't aging quietly. She was aging in power. But as the guests began arriving, whispers followed. Meghan and Harry were expected, but no one knew when. The Kardashians made their entrance first. Of course, the family that turned every moment into a brand. Kim floated in wearing silver sequins, Khloe in champagne silk, Kylie shimmering in deep red. Cameras clicked, guests gasped, and the air crackled with flashbulbs. Then came Beyoncé, understated yet untouchable. Denzel, effortlessly regal. George Clooney and Amal, graceful as ever. Oprah arrived with quiet authority, the kind of presence that silences a room. Every arrival added to the night's electricity. But everyone, consciously or not, was waiting for the couple who always managed to make an entrance feel like a headline. And then they appeared. Harry and Meghan stepped out of a black Rolls-Royce, framed by soft lights. Meghan in an ivory gown that clung to her silhouette, her hair swept back to reveal diamond drop earrings. Harry, clean-cut, holding her hand as if determined to remind everyone they were still united. But the reaction was muted. Yes, cameras flashed. Yes, guests turned their heads. But the cheers weren't as loud as they once were. The smiles weren't as genuine. There was curiosity, not celebration. Meghan noticed it immediately. She'd always been good at reading rooms. She knew when applause was real and when it was obligatory. And that night, it was the latter. Harry felt it too. He gave a polite nod to Denzel, exchanged a brief handshake with Clooney, but the warmth was missing. The Hollywood elite, once dazzled by their royal rebellion, now regarded them with polite distance, as if the magic had worn off. Still, Kris Jenner, ever the gracious hostess, greeted them warmly. "So glad you made it," she said, her voice honeyed yet sharp. "We've got quite a night planned." What Meghan didn't realize was that she and Harry were part of the night's entertainment, not as guests of honor, but as subjects of curiosity. And that became painfully clear when they were escorted to their seats. Kris's table, the centerpiece of the ballroom, was reserved for her closest circle: Kim, Oprah, Denzel, Beyoncé, and Clooney. Meghan and Harry's names, however, were found at a side table. Still prestigious, yes, but not central. It was a subtle demotion, the kind that only someone in Hollywood could make sting without saying a word. As the night progressed, the atmosphere glittered with false laughter and whispered alliances. Champagne flowed, Camera phones stayed discreetly raised, and conversations sparkled with subtext. Across the room, Meghan watched as Oprah leaned in to whisper something to Kris. They laughed softly. Meghan smiled back when Kris's gaze caught hers, but the tension was impossible to ignore. She dreamed of this world, of being accepted by it. But this wasn't acceptance. It was performance. Everyone in that room was performing, and Meghan, perhaps unknowingly, was playing the role of the fallen star, still pretending her light hadn't dimmed. Harry, meanwhile, seemed restless. He glanced around, half smiling, clearly uncomfortable in a setting that mixed luxury with invisible politics. These were not his people. They were Meghan's people, or at least, they had been. He leaned in at one point and whispered something, perhaps suggesting they leave early. Meghan's jaw tightened. Leaving early would mean defeat. Staying meant enduring whatever subtle humiliation the night had prepared. She stayed. And that decision, that moment of pride, is what led to everything that followed. Because just as dessert was being served, Kris Jenner rose from her table and took the stage. The room quieted instantly. Everyone adored Kris's toasts. Part humor, part strategy, always unforgettable. She began with gratitude, a few jokes about age, fame, and her family's empire. Then she smiled slyly and said, "Now, I thought it'd be fun to have a little surprise tonight. You all know I love a good laugh, so I invited someone who can deliver." She gestured toward the side entrance. The spotlight shifted, and in walked Chris Rock. The crowd erupted, applause, cheers, whistles. Chris Rock, the man who could make or break reputations with a single line. His presence wasn't just unexpected, it was electric. Harry clapped, trying to appear casual. Meghan's smile was tight. Chris approached the microphone, bowing slightly to Kris. 70 years of power, beauty, and chaos, he began. Kris Jenner, you've done what every mother dreams of. You made your kids billionaires before bedtime. Laughter exploded. The room was alive. Even Harry chuckled. But Meghan, she was studying him. She'd seen enough of Kris's work to know that behind every punchline was a scalpel. He continued with his signature rhythm, pacing the stage, throwing rapid-fire jokes about Hollywood excess, social media obsessions, and the absurdity of fame. The audience adored it. But then, somewhere between a Kardashian quip and a playful jab at Hollywood activism, Kris paused, looked around, smiled. "You know," he said, "I thought this was going to be the fanciest royal event I ever went to. Then I realized. Oh, they're already here." The laughter came in waves. Nervous, scattered at first, then louder. Kris's timing was flawless. Meghan froze. Harry stared straight ahead. "And I gotta say," Kris added, pacing with exaggerated thoughtfulness, "back when America broke away from royalty, I didn't think we'd ever go back. But now we're out here giving them talk shows and Netflix specials. Man, we're generous." The laughter this time was sharp, real, the kind that stings. That was the moment the night shifted. The polite smiles evaporated. Everyone in the room knew this was no longer a safe performance. It was a roast, and Meghan and Harry were on the menu. Kris watched from her table, her expression unreadable. Kim tried not to laugh. Oprah's lips pressed into a thin line. Beyoncé simply crossed her arms and looked away. It was surreal. The couple who once held the world's sympathy were now being dissected by one of comedy's sharpest voices in front of their peers. And here's what made it worse. Everyone else was laughing. Harry's jaw tightened. Meghan forced a smile, nodding as if in on the joke. But behind that smile, there was panic. This wasn't just embarrassment. This was exposure. The facade was cracking, live, on one of Hollywood's most exclusive stages. A reporter who later leaked details described it best. It wasn't mean. It was precise. Chris Rock didn't attack them. He revealed them. In that single moment, every tension that had been brewing between Meghan and Hollywood exploded under laughter. Kris's humor, surgical and fearless, reflected what everyone had been whispering. That maybe the Duke and Duchess weren't heroes or victims. Maybe they were just performers who overstayed their spotlight. And as the laughter swelled, Meghan realized something terrifying. No matter how much control she thought she had over her image, no PR team, no documentary, no sympathetic interview could undo what was happening in that room. Because this wasn't a palace scandal or a British tabloid headline. This was Hollywood. And Hollywood doesn't forgive cringe, it multiplies it. The laughter grew. Glasses clinked. The cameras discreetly zoomed in, and Kris, with the rhythm of a master storyteller, leaned closer to the mic and said something that sent ripples through the entire ballroom. Something no one expected. Something that would end Meghan's illusion of Hollywood royalty once and for all. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It began with applause, not the polite kind, but the genuine, roaring kind that shakes a room. Chris Rock stood beneath the chandelier's golden glow, grinning like a man who knew he had the crowd before he even spoke. He didn't need an introduction. His presence alone was a statement. The lights dimmed just enough to focus every eye on him. The ballroom hushed, the laughter lingering like static in the air. Meghan straightened in her chair. Harry leaned forward slightly, one hand clenched around his glass. They both knew Chris Rock wasn't a man who played safe. He had that unpredictable energy, the kind that could turn a joke into a weapon or a moment of truth. "Man, look at this crowd," he started, pacing the edge of the stage with that familiar swagger. "I ain't never seen this many billionaires and Botox in one place." The room erupted. Even Kris Jenner doubled over with laughter, dabbing at her eyes. Chris looked around the room, soaking in the applause. We celebrating 70 years of Kris Jenner, the woman who turned family drama into global profit. If she had been around in the Bible, she'd have monetized Adam and Eve. Coming next season, Eden Unfiltered. The laughter was wild, the mood electric, and for a brief moment, Meghan relaxed. She smiled, even laughed softly. Maybe, she thought, it wasn't going to be so bad. But that's the thing about comedy. It lures you in with laughter before it cuts deep. Chris took a sip of champagne from a waiter passing by. "Man, Chris, you got everybody here. Legends, moguls, influencers, even royalty. That's impressive. Royalty in Hollywood. Never thought I'd see that." A murmur spread. Heads turned. He grinned wider. "Yeah, we got a Duke and Duchess in the house. I thought I had to fly to Buckingham Palace to see that. But nah, they brought Buckingham to Beverly Hills." The laughter this time was more cautious. Some people clapped, others chuckled nervously. Meghan's smile stiffened. Chris leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to make everyone lean in. "But seriously, give it up for Harry and Meghan. Leaving the palace for Netflix? That's gangster." The crowd laughed again, louder this time, but Meghan caught the tone. It wasn't admiration. It was mockery disguised as amusement. Harry shifted in his seat, glancing around the table. His jaw flexed. Meghan's hand rested on his arm, a silent reminder to stay composed. Chris continued, his rhythm flawless. "Now, I gotta be honest, I didn't know you could quit being royal. I thought it was a lifetime gig. Like jury duty or something. You don't just say, 'I'm out.'" The laughter grew, echoing against the marble walls. Even Denzel couldn't suppress a grin. Chris kept going. "I mean, look, I get it. Royal life looks stressful. You got rules, traditions, no privacy, tabloids up your nose. But come on. You leave all that behind just to complain about it on Oprah? That's like quitting McDonald's and opening a podcast about fries." That line hit like lightning. The room howled. Kim Kardashian was laughing so hard she had to cover her face. Even Chris tried to contain herself, biting her lip. But not everyone was laughing. Meghan sat motionless, her smile frozen in place, the muscles in her face trembling slightly. Harry looked away, eyes fixed on the stage, lips pressed into a thin line. Chris sensed the tension. He thrived on it. "Y'all chill. I'm just having fun," he said, grinning. "We love y'all. We do. But Hollywood loves drama more. And man, y'all been delivering." The laughter this time was deafening. He walked to the edge of the stage, his voice rising just enough to dominate the room. "You ever notice how every time these two show up, it's always something heavy? Like, it's never just, 'Hey, we came to hang out.' Nah, it's always a documentary, an interview, a revelation. I'm like, damn, is every dinner a press conference?" Laughter, applause, cheers. And yet, behind the noise, there was something else, relief. The laughter was more than amusement, it was release. The people in that room, many of whom had worked with or crossed paths with Meghan and Harry, had been waiting for someone to say out loud what they'd been whispering for years. Chris was doing what no one else dared. Meghan glanced around. The smiles directed at her weren't kind. They were entertained. It was the Hollywood smile, the one that hides a knife behind every compliment. She tried to laugh it off, leaning closer to Harry. "He's just joking," she whispered. But the words felt hollow even as she said them. Harry's hand didn't move. Kris, still pacing, smirked. "I mean, I get the hustle. You gotta make that California mortgage money somehow. But when you start calling yourself victims while living in a mansion bigger than Buckingham's gift shop, people start asking questions." That line hit harder. The laughter this time was awkward, punctuated by gasps and clinking glasses. Kris Jenner tried to keep the atmosphere light, clapping and calling out, "He's just keeping it real." But Meghan didn't look at her. She was staring straight ahead, eyes glassy, lips trembling. Kris smiled knowingly. "But hey, look, no disrespect. Everybody's trying to make a living. I just didn't know royal titles came with a Patreon." The room exploded. That was the moment. The line that turned the entire night from playful to brutal. Even those who didn't laugh couldn't hide their shock. Cameras subtly turned, capturing the Sussexes' reactions. Producers and PR reps would later fight over that footage, some insisting it never see the light of day. Meghan sat still, blinking rapidly, her throat tightening. Harry's face had gone pale. Kris's timing was merciless. He paused, letting the laughter die down before continuing. "But look, I respect the grind. Seriously. It takes guts to leave royalty behind for show business. That's like quitting the NBA to start a YouTube channel." The room erupted again. People were laughing so hard they didn't even notice the look on Meghan's face. That mixture of disbelief and humiliation. She'd thought she was entering a room full of peers. Instead, she was standing trial in the court of comedy and losing. And the worst part? Everyone's laughter told her the verdict. Harry leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "We should go," he muttered. But Meghan shook her head slightly. Leaving would mean surrender. She'd built her entire persona around strength, resilience, composure. Walking out would hand the tabloids exactly what they wanted. So she stayed, smiling, nodding, pretending. But inside, something broke. Kris, sensing the discomfort, didn't stop. If anything, he doubled down, not out of cruelty, but instinct. He was a comedian. The tension was fuel. "Nah, I'm kidding. I love y'all. For real. It takes a special kind of bravery to leave the royal family. I just didn't know you could turn it into a business model. That's innovative." The crowd burst into laughter again. And then came the moment no one forgot. The joke that silenced even the loudest laughers. Kris paused, looked directly toward Meghan and Harry. The room followed his gaze. He tilted his head, smiled faintly, and said, "I guess at this point, we're all just waiting to see what they'll sell next. Maybe a podcast called Grifting Gracefully." The silence that followed was heavy. Then came the nervous laughter, not joyful, but sharp. People didn't know whether to laugh or gasp. That was the first time the word grifters floated through the room. Not shouted, not accused, joked. But everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. Meghan's breath caught in her throat. Harry's jaw clenched. Kris, oblivious to the emotional carnage, smiled and took a step back. "All love, y'all. It's comedy. Nobody's safe." But the damage was done. The audience clapped wildly. Some stood, cheering. Others exchanged knowing glances. The whispers began almost immediately. Low, fast, scandalized. Did he really just call them grifters? Did you see her face? Was that planned? Kris Jenner, standing off stage, couldn't hide the flicker of amusement in her eyes. She had orchestrated countless viral moments in her life, but none like this. Harry and Meghan sat in silence. The laughter, the applause, the flashing cameras, all of it faded into a dull roar. Because at that moment, they both realized something chilling. They had spent years trying to control their narrative, fighting tabloids, reshaping their image through interviews and deals. But here, in less than 10 minutes, one comedian had undone all of it. The truth wasn't shouted. It was laughed. And laughter, once unleashed, couldn't be stopped. Kris wrapped up his set with light jokes again, trying to balance the mood. The crowd cheered him offstage like a hero. He smiled, waved, and disappeared behind the curtain, leaving behind a ballroom buzzing with awkward energy and unspoken truths. Meghan reached for her glass, her hand trembling. Harry didn't look at her. Somewhere near the bar, an assistant whispered into her phone, "That clip needs to go viral." And by morning, it would. But that wasn't the end of the humiliation. Because what Kris said next, during a backstage conversation caught on a hot mic, would turn the night from uncomfortable to explosive. And once those words leaked, there would be no going back. Because this time, it wouldn't just be a joke, it would be a verdict. And Meghan's Hollywood fairy tale would never recover. But what came next would make the word grifters echo louder than ever before. For a few long seconds, there was nothing but silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful, but the kind that feels dangerous, the kind that swallows sound because no one dares to breathe. Chris Rock stood at the center of the stage, mic in hand, his eyes scanning the crowd. The laughter had evaporated, replaced by that uneasy hush that only happens when a joke cuts too close to the truth. Meghan's lips parted slightly, as if to laugh, but no sound came out. Her face had gone pale, her eyes locked on the stage. Harry, rigid beside her, sat motionless. That was the moment. The pivot. The one that everyone in the room would remember. Chris could feel it too. Comedians live for tension, the tightrope between truth and offense. But this silence was different. It wasn't awkward. It was electric. It meant he had hit something real. He smirked, leaned into the mic, and said softly, "What? Too real." The audience erupted, not with laughter, but nervous chuckles, scattered applause, the kind that says, "We shouldn't be laughing, but we are." That only fueled him. "Come on now, y'all acting like I said something new. Everybody in this town's been whispering the same thing. I just said it loud enough for the cameras." Laughter again. A few bold voices clapped harder. Someone whistled. But the energy had changed. Chris knew he had everyone's full attention now, and he wasn't done. "You know what's funny?" he continued, pacing like a preacher in a diamond-studded church. "When Harry and Meghan said they were leaving royalty for privacy, I believed them. I thought, good for them. Then next thing I know, I'm watching their 6-part Netflix doc about how much they hate attention." The room erupted. The tension shattered like glass. Everyone laughed, loudly, freely. Some even stood. It was the kind of laughter that had been building for months, maybe years. Meghan didn't laugh. She sat perfectly still, blinking fast, her nails pressed into her palm. Chris kept going, the rhythm of his delivery flawless. "They're like the first people in history to quit their job and then make a movie about how bad their old boss was. Can you imagine leaving McDonald's and doing a documentary called Behind the Fries?" The laughter came in waves. Even Oprah, seated near the front, couldn't suppress a small smile, though she quickly looked away when she saw Meghan's face. Harry's jaw flexed. His hand tightened on the tablecloth. The cameras, discreet, distant, zoomed in, catching every twitch, every forced smile. Chris continued, turning toward the crowd as if confessing something personal. "And look, I get it. Royal life ain't easy. You got rules, scandals, tabloids. But don't tell me you left all that behind for peace, when every 6 months you drop another tell-all." The laughter exploded again, echoing off the marble ceiling. People clapped, hooted, leaned on each other. It wasn't just a comedy routine anymore. It was catharsis. For Hollywood, this was a purge. The night they finally said what they'd been holding in, they were tired. Tired of the Sussex narrative, the victimhood, the curated interviews. Chris leaned forward, eyes glinting under the stage lights. "Y'all ever notice how every time they say, 'We just want to live a normal life,' it comes with a new deal? Netflix, Spotify, book, podcast. I'm starting to think their definition of privacy is just pay-per-view." The crowd went wild. People were crying with laughter. Some recorded discreetly, pretending to check their phones. And then, the moment that changed everything. Chris paused, looked straight at Harry and Meghan. His grin softened, his tone dropped to a near whisper. "But hey, I get it. We all hustling. Just some folks hustle a little harder than others. Ain't that right, your graces?" The word graces hit like a jab. Playful, but with venom underneath. Meghan's throat tightened. Her heart hammered. She could feel the stares, the phones, the subtle smirks. She wanted to vanish. But Chris wasn't finished. "I mean, seriously. America loves a good comeback story. But when you start turning every heartbreak into a headline, every memory into merchandise, it stops being a story. It starts being a business. And at that point, you ain't royalty anymore. You're just grifters in crowns." The room gasped. There it was. The word. Grifters. It hung in the air like smoke. Thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. The laughter died. The music, the chatter, even the clinking glasses, all stopped. It was one of those rare moments in Hollywood where everyone knew they had just witnessed history and scandal collide. Someone near the back whispered, "Did he just call them?" "Yes," came another voice. "He did." Meghan's face flushed crimson. Harry turned toward her, whispering something under his breath. She didn't respond. Her eyes glistened, her lips trembling just enough to betray how deeply the word cut. Kris didn't flinch. He stood tall, microphone steady, smiling faintly. "Hey, don't get mad. I'm just saying what people been thinking. Y'all out here suing tabloids, but half your business model is spilling tea. That's irony, baby." The audience erupted again, louder this time, half laughing, half applauding the audacity. But not everyone was amused. Oprah's expression darkened. Denzel shifted uncomfortably. Even Kris Jenner, master of manufactured chaos, looked momentarily unsure whether to laugh or intervene. Still, she didn't stop it. Because Kris understood something the others didn't. Scandal feeds fame. And tonight, her party had just become legendary. Meghan tried to smile again, but her lips quivered. She turned her face slightly away from the stage. Harry placed a hand on her back, his jaw tight. And Kris? He went for the closer. The one-liner that would be replayed online, dissected in tabloids, and quoted for years. "You can call yourself a duchess all you want," he said, pacing slowly across the stage. "But when the crown don't come from blood, it comes from branding." The room went silent again. This time, it wasn't shock. It was awe. The truth of it landed like a thunderclap. Because that was the heart of it. Meghan's royalty wasn't inherited. It was constructed, packaged, and sold. Kris nodded, as if satisfied. "But hey, it's Hollywood. That's what we do. We sell dreams. Just don't act surprised when the audience wakes up." He grinned. "Anyway, happy birthday, Kris. I love you, baby. Keep making history." The room erupted into standing applause. Cheers, laughter, clapping that went on for nearly a minute. But at one table, near the side of the ballroom, two people didn't move. Harry stared at the stage with a look that could cut glass. Meghan sat motionless, blinking hard, her smile gone. And though the noise around them was deafening, they heard nothing, just the echo of one word. "Grifters." After that, the energy in the room shifted for good. Some guests avoided eye contact. Others whispered behind napkins. The birthday atmosphere was gone, replaced by a low buzz of gossip and disbelief. Kris Jenner tried to smooth things over, raising her glass and calling out, "All right, everyone, let's drink to 70 years of survival." People laughed, clapped, toasted, but their eyes still darted toward Meghan and Harry's table. Oprah quietly excused herself a few minutes later, her security following behind. Denzel leaned over to whisper something to Clooney, who simply nodded and sighed. Beyoncé stayed silent, expression unreadable. For Meghan, it felt like the walls were closing in. Every whisper, every giggle, every sideways glance burned into her. She leaned toward Harry. "We're leaving," she whispered, voice trembling. But before they could rise, a photographer near the door raised his phone, just for a second. A flash, a sound, one photo. The next morning, that photo would circulate across every gossip site and social platform. Meghan Markle's frozen smile under the caption, "When the joke hits too close to home." That image, more than the joke itself, would cement the humiliation. Because the internet doesn't care about context. It cares about reaction. And Meghan's reaction had told the story better than any headline could. What she didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that someone had recorded the entire set. Not the broadcast-friendly version. The raw footage. The private roast. And that recording, leaked within hours, would spark a digital storm that not even Kris Jenner could contain. But before that chaos hit the internet, something else happened inside that ballroom. Something unplanned. Unscripted. Caught only by a handful of witnesses sitting close enough to see it happen. As Kris left the stage, smiling and waving, Harry suddenly stood. The air shifted again. The laughter stopped mid-echo. Harry's hand brushed Meghan's shoulder, a gesture that said everything words couldn't. And then, under his breath, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, he muttered, "This is why I hate this city." The words weren't angry, they were broken. But Meghan didn't respond. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. Because in that moment, something inside her finally cracked. Not from the joke itself, but from the realization that no matter how far she ran, No matter how many interviews or deals or red carpets, the laughter would follow. And the night wasn't even over. Because the cameras may have stopped rolling, but the microphones? They hadn't. Someone backstage caught everything Kris said when he stepped off the stage, the offhand remark that would send shockwaves through the industry. A single sentence, muttered with a chuckle, into a hot mic he didn't know was still live. A sentence that would soon define the downfall of the Sussex brand. He said, "Man, I didn't roast them, I just told the truth. Hollywood don't do grifters. Not forever." And that recording would leak before sunrise. But what came next, the social media storm, the leaked footage, and Kris Jenner's next move, would turn a single joke into a cultural earthquake. The sun hadn't even risen over Los Angeles when the first clip hit Twitter. A dimly lit, shaky phone recording, 47 seconds long. Chris Rock on stage, the crowd howling, and that one word ringing out like a gunshot. Grifters. The video wasn't polished. It wasn't framed well. But it didn't need to be. The sound was clear. The laughter was undeniable. And Meghan's face, caught in the corner of the shot, said everything words couldn't. By 6 a.m., it had 2 million views. By noon, it had 30. By the end of the day, it was everywhere. The headline that dominated social media was simple, brutal, and unforgettable. Chris Rock calls Harry and Meghan grifters at Kris Jenner's 70th birthday party. Room erupts. No context. No disclaimers. No mercy. Hollywood gossip pages lit up. Twitter threads dissected every syllable. TikTok creators froze frames of Meghan's face, zooming in dramatically, overlaying sad music. YouTubers posted reaction videos titled, "Did Chris Rock go too far?" Or "He said what everyone's thinking." It was the perfect storm: scandal, celebrity, and schadenfreude. Because deep down, people weren't shocked by what Chris said. They were relieved someone had finally said it. The word grifter wasn't new. It had hovered around the Sussexes for months, whispered in private circles, murmured in comment sections. But hearing it spoken aloud, in front of their peers, by one of comedy's sharpest minds, that gave it legitimacy. And the internet, ruthless as ever, ran with it. Within hours, memes flooded the web. Photos of Meghan with captions like, "When the hustle meets the punchline." Harry's face photoshopped onto Monopoly money. One viral tweet read, "They wanted privacy so bad they made sure everyone saw this." The laughter that had begun in a glittering ballroom now echoed across the world. Meanwhile, inside their Montecito mansion, the mood was anything but funny. Harry was pacing, phone in hand, scrolling through Twitter. Meghan sat at the edge of the bed, her laptop open, watching the clip over and over again. Each replay felt like another punch to the stomach. "How did it leak?" she demanded, voice breaking. "Who recorded this?" It was a private event. Harry didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew. In Hollywood, nothing stays private. Not even humiliation. He threw his phone onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "You knew what this was going to be," he muttered. "You said it was a good idea to go." Meghan looked up sharply. "Are you blaming me for this?" "Chris invited us. We couldn't say no." He shot back. "We could've, we should've. You wanted to be there. You said it was about connections. About optics." "Optics?" she snapped. "I didn't know Chris Rock was going to." But she couldn't finish the sentence. Because deep down, she knew that was a lie. She knew exactly what kind of man Chris Rock was. Fearless, unfiltered, sharp. He wasn't there to flatter. He was there to entertain. And to everyone else in that room, they weren't royalty. They were material. Hours later, as they sat in silence, Harry's phone buzzed again. A message from an old friend still in London. "Mate," it read, "that joke's on every channel here. The palace must be laughing their heads off." Harry threw the phone across the room. But it didn't matter. The damage had already crossed oceans. In London, the tabloids feasted. Headlines screamed, "Hollywood turns on Sussexes." Even the stars are tired of Meghan's whining. Comedian calls royal runaways grifters, crowd applauds. Even the Times, usually more restrained, published a piece titled, "When the Joke Becomes the Truth." Across the Atlantic, the royal machine was spinning quietly, efficiently. While Meghan and Harry stewed in silence, palace insiders leaked tidbits to the press. The king found it rather amusing, one source claimed. He always said Hollywood would tire of them eventually. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For years, the Sussexes had accused the royals of feeding the press. Now the press didn't need feeding. They had new predators. But this was more than gossip. The grifter label began to spread beyond tabloids and social media. It started showing up in business meetings, in executive boardrooms, in brand discussions. Publicists whispered it like a curse. "Don't tie your name to theirs right now," one agent warned. "They're radioactive." A Netflix insider, speaking off the record, summed it up perfectly. The public doesn't buy their authenticity anymore. They think it's all scripted, even their pain. That's when Meghan realized it wasn't just a PR nightmare. It was a credibility collapse. Every partnership, every negotiation they'd been working on, paused. Brand deals under review. Invitations postponed. Calls not returned. It wasn't personal. It was Hollywood. And Hollywood loves an underdog, but it loves a downfall even more. Meanwhile, Chris Rock stayed silent. His team refused interviews. His reps gave no comment. But his silence only fueled the fire. It made him look unbothered, victorious, authentic. And that authenticity, in contrast, made Meghan and Harry look hollow, manufactured, artificial. Kris Jenner, on the other hand, was basking in the chaos. She'd turned her 70th birthday into the year's biggest headline without spending a dime on marketing. Her PR team even joked, "We should thank Kris in the Christmas card." Still, Kris wasn't cruel. She sent Meghan a short message the next morning. "Hope you're doing okay, darling. Hollywood has a short memory. Let it pass." It sounded kind, but Meghan heard the subtext loud and clear. "You're on your own." By the third day, the fallout had reached absurd levels. Talk shows opened their segments with clips of Kris's performance. Late-night hosts turned it into punchlines. Jimmy Kimmel joked, "Chris Rock roasted Harry and Meghan so hard. Buckingham Palace sent him a thank you card." The audience laughed, clapped, cheered. It wasn't just a meme anymore. It was a movement. And the word grifter became more than an insult. It became a cultural brand. Twitter bios joked, "Recovering grifter." Podcasts titled episodes "The Grift" and "The Glam." Even Urban Dictionary updated its entry. Grifter, noun someone who sells their own drama for profit. See, Sussex, Meghan and Harry. That definition screenshot went viral, and Meghan's team scrambled to get it removed. They failed. Behind closed doors, her PR strategists were panicking. "We can't fight the narrative," one advisor said. "We have to redirect it." "Redirect it how?" Meghan demanded. "Lean into empathy," the strategist replied. "Show humanity. Cry if you have to. Turn the humiliation into a lesson about resilience." But Meghan wasn't listening. She was staring out the window, her mind replaying that single word again and again. Grifters. It didn't matter that Chris Rock had meant it as a joke. The audience, and the internet, had taken it as truth. And in Hollywood, truth doesn't have to be real. It just has to be viral. Harry, meanwhile, was furious. "We've been humiliated in front of the entire world," he told Meghan. "I don't care about optics anymore. I want out of this circus." But out of what? The circus was them now. Every move they made was a headline. Every word they spoke was dissected. They couldn't go back to the palace. They couldn't disappear quietly. They couldn't even defend themselves without proving Kris's point. Because the more they spoke, the more it looked like a performance. By the end of the week, Chris Rock broke his silence, accidentally. TMZ caught him leaving his studio, and a reporter shouted, "Chris, do you regret calling Meghan and Harry grifters?" He smiled, didn't slow down, and said, "I didn't call them anything they ain't already calling themselves." The clip went viral instantly. That single offhand remark reignited the story, pushing it into another week of headlines. And this time, it wasn't just tabloids or gossip bloggers. The Los Angeles Times ran an op-ed titled, "When Authenticity Meets Exploitation, The Sussex Dilemma." Variety called it, "The moment Hollywood finally turned the mirror on itself." Even comedians began referencing it on stage. Each time, the audience roaring louder. It was no longer just about Harry and Meghan. It had become symbolic, the fall of curated victimhood in an age of performative empathy. And for Meghan, that realization hurt more than the word itself. Because once again, her story wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to everyone else, to comedians, critics, and the crowd. She tried one more desperate move, a private outreach to Kris Jenner. An invitation to lunch. Damage control. A chance to reframe the story as misunderstood humor. Kris politely declined. Too soon. Her assistant texted back, "We'll reconnect in a few months." That was Hollywood code for never. And so, for the first time in years, Meghan was silent. No statements, no interviews, no carefully worded essays. Because she finally understood what Chris Rock had really done that night. He hadn't insulted her. He'd stripped away her script. And without it, there was nothing left but the truth, or at least, what people believed was the truth. In Beverly Hills, among the powerful and the famous, one word was now whispered with knowing smirks. Grifters. And Meghan, no matter what she did, couldn't unhear it. But the story wasn't done. Because while the internet laughed and Hollywood distanced itself, someone else, someone with far more influence than Chris Rock, was about to make a move that would turn this viral scandal into a global reckoning. Kris Jenner. And her next act would make the word grifter feel like a compliment that IT started with one video. Then came another. At first, no one knew where it came from. Some claimed it was a guest who'd filmed discreetly from the second tier of the ballroom. Others said it was a member of the event staff. A few even whispered that Kris Jenner herself had quietly approved its release. But whoever leaked it, they knew exactly what they were doing. Because this wasn't just another clip. This was the full thing. Chris Rock's entire set, unedited. Every joke, every reaction, every awkward silence, every camera pan that caught Meghan and Harry's faces. The video opened on a swirl of laughter, champagne glasses glinting under chandelier light. But what made it different from the earlier snippets was what came after the famous grifters line. The crowd's reaction, the hesitation, the burst of laughter, the whispers, it was all there in crystal clarity. You could see Meghan's frozen smile fade, her hand tremble slightly as she lowered her glass. You could see Harry leaning in, muttering something under his breath. You could even see Kris Jenner watching, expression unreadable, her lips curving into that faint, calculated half-smile. When the video hit X, formerly Twitter, it was like gasoline hitting open flame. Within an hour, it had surpassed 10 million views. By morning, it was on every major platform: TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, even Facebook pages that usually only shared baby photos and cooking tips. But it wasn't just the footage that drew attention. It was the angle, the clarity, the intimacy. Someone, somehow, had gotten footage that looked almost professional. And that suggested one thing: it wasn't just a guest. It was someone on the inside. Full video leak from Kris Jenner's birthday shows Meghan Markle's reaction in HD, screamed one headline. Harry visibly furious as Chris Rock calls them grifters in leaked footage, read another. In the clip, you could hear it. The sound of Harry's sharp exhale, the faint rustle as Meghan shifted in her seat. That one movement became the internet's obsession. Frame by frame, analysts on TikTok began breaking it down like forensic experts. She's blinking rapidly here. That's a sign of shock. Harry's lip moves right after the word grifters. Looks like he says, unbelievable. She's clutching her dress, a subconscious defensive gesture. Every second became content. Every gesture became a theory. And with each re-upload, each remix, each reaction video, the narrative grew darker. She looks guilty, one YouTuber said in a viral breakdown. Like someone who's been caught. Another influencer chimed in. I used to feel bad for Meghan, but now? I don't know. The body language says it all. Even mainstream outlets joined in. Morning talk shows debated whether the leak was fair game or a public shaming. But the damage was done. Because what had once been gossip had now become evidence. Evidence of how far the Sussexes had fallen in Hollywood's hierarchy. In Montecito, the mood was toxic. Meghan's team scrambled to control the narrative, reaching out to networks, filing copyright takedowns, even trying to contact Chris's representatives. But it was hopeless. Once a video hits the internet, it becomes untouchable. Harry was livid. Someone did this deliberately, he said, pacing the living room as the TV replayed the footage on loop. This isn't some random leak. This was planned. Meghan's eyes were red from crying. Of course it was planned, she whispered. Chris set us up. That whole invitation was a setup. Harry stopped pacing. You think Jenner leaked it? Who else benefits? She shot back. She gets global attention. Her brand gets a boost. And we're the collateral damage. It's what she does. Harry exhaled, rubbing his forehead. We can't prove that. Meghan glared at him. We don't need to prove it. People believe what they see. And right now, they're seeing us as clowns. She was right. Online, the comments had turned vicious. What started as humor had become mockery. From royalty to reality TV rejects, one user wrote, Meghan wanted Hollywood fame. Well, she got it. Chris Rock did in 10 minutes what the palace couldn't do in 10 years. The couple's public image, already fragile, was crumbling in real time. By the second day, late-night hosts were replaying the footage with dramatic commentary. Meme compilations dominated YouTube. One particularly viral edit cut Chris Rock's "Grifters" line with slow-motion shots of Meghan's shocked expression, overlaid with the sound of cash registers and laugh tracks. It was brutal. It was relentless. And there was no stopping it. Meanwhile, inside the Beverly Hills Hotel, whispers began to circulate among staff. Security footage logs were being reviewed. Phones were checked, but no culprit was ever found. Some believed Kris Jenner herself had ordered the recording. Others claimed it was her publicist, eager to make the party go viral. A few even suggested someone close to Chris Rock's team had leaked it to boost his upcoming Netflix special. But deep down, everyone knew the truth didn't matter. The outcome did. Hollywood had turned. Kris Jenner's birthday, meant to celebrate a legacy, had instead become a funeral for the Sussexes' Hollywood reputation. And Kris? She said nothing publicly. No tweets. No statements. Just a quiet smile when paparazzi shouted questions at her days later. A smile that said, I don't start drama. I just know how to use it. Meanwhile, Meghan's circle was shrinking fast. Invitations that had once come daily stopped. Friends who'd once defended her online went silent. The whispers in the Beverly Hills social scene were merciless. She's radioactive. She's exhausting. She's suing everyone, but losing everything. Even Tyler Perry, once their most vocal ally, reportedly distanced himself, telling mutual friends he didn't want to get dragged into another PR circus. The Sussex brand was imploding, not because of one joke, but because of what it revealed. The illusion had cracked. And then came the second leak. A longer cut, nearly 8 minutes this time, showing not just Chris's set, but the aftermath. The murmurs. The side conversations. The look on Kris Jenner's face when she leaned toward Kim and whispered something that made Kim stifle a laugh. The internet lost its mind again. Hashtags like #GrifterGate, #HollywoodHumiliation, and #ChrisKnew began trending. One slowed-down clip of Kris whispering was shared 50 million times in 24 hours. Amateur lip readers flooded TikTok, insisting they could decode what she said. Some claimed it was, I told you she'd break. Others swore it was show's over. No one could agree, but everyone believed something sinister was behind it. And while the world obsessed over the footage, Meghan retreated from the public eye completely. No paparazzi sightings. No Instagram posts. No statements. Just silence. But silence, in Hollywood, is blood in the water. Entertainment pundits began speculating about her mental state. Sources close to Meghan say she's devastated, reported one outlet. Another claimed, the Duchess feels betrayed and trapped. Harry tried to hold it together, but his anger was starting to turn inward. He'd left everything, family, duty, tradition, for freedom. And now that freedom had turned into a prison of public ridicule. He started snapping at his staff. Canceling appearances, declining meetings. Meghan, meanwhile, spent hours on the phone with her PR strategist. We need a counterstory, she insisted. We need to redirect. If we don't, this sticks forever. But the strategist's voice on the other end was calm, too calm. It's already stuck, Meghan. The public has decided. You can't outtalk a joke. You can only outlive it. Those words hit her harder than the joke itself. Because for the first time, Meghan realized the truth. This wasn't about Chris Rock anymore. This wasn't even about Kris Jenner. It was about power, who owned it, who controlled it, and who had just lost it. And she had lost it. Completely. The next morning, TMZ dropped one more bombshell. The raw audio from Chris Rock's backstage mic, the one where he laughed and said, Hollywood don't do grifters. Not forever. It was the final blow. Every outlet played it on repeat. The word grifters echoed through living rooms, cars, offices. It became unavoidable, a pop culture mantra. In London, reporters asked palace officials if the king had seen the footage. A spokesperson smiled politely and said, His Majesty doesn't comment on entertainment news. Translation, he'd seen it. And he was laughing. Even within Meghan's dwindling Hollywood circle, people were asking the unaskable. Is there a way back from this? No one could answer, because reputation in Hollywood isn't lost, it's traded. And Meghan and Harry's currency had just bottomed out. But just when it seemed the storm had peaked, Kris Jenner made her move. An invitation-only press dinner at her Hidden Hills mansion. Champagne, candles, and a new tagline whispered among guests. Crisis creates opportunity. At that dinner, Kris reportedly pitched a new Hulu concept, the Royal Roast, a celebrity comedy event for charity, inspired by the power of laughter to heal. Guests clinked glasses. Kris smiled. And somewhere, far away, Meghan Markle's phone buzzed with another notification, the one headline that confirmed her worst fear. Kris Jenner turns Meghan Markle scandal into new show pitch. The irony was perfect. The cycle complete. The woman who built her empire on other people's stories had just turned Meghan's humiliation into her next success. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest punchline of all. But what came next would prove that Kris wasn't the only one capitalizing on the chaos.